Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show.
What I suspect is that there is going to be an enormous surge, first of research and development, and then of new business opportunities coming off of that research and development around IoT device connecting directly into various kinds of digital assets that live on various kinds of blockchains. And the first companies that really realize that opportunity and participate in communities like the Trusted IoT Alliance and set the rules for how different kinds of business processes now include these trusted IoT devices.
Want to incorporate blockchain into IoT? Well, that's a pretty tall order, but you have two ways to go about it. Go it alone to build the world's best IoT blockchain protocol and hope that it's adopted, or join others that have similar goals to build the world's best IoT blockchain protocol in hopes that it's adopted. In this episode of the IoT Business Show, I speak with Zaki Manian about the technology and business advantages of blockchain and IoT and the approach the Trusted IoT Alliance is taking to make them a reality.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc. Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc. Business Show. This show is for business leaders and managers employing the Internet of Things for their business or the business of their customers. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair, and I interview the industry's leading authorities to find out how they use IoT to improve business and create value. If you like this show, subscribe to it on iTunes and go to iotinc.com to check out my complimentary articles, videos, meetups, and webinars.
I want to give everyone a heads up on the IoT Inc. certification training program I've been working on since April. It's based on my book and the live workshops I've been doing over the last 3 years. The program consists of 3 courses: IoT Tech, IoT Business, and IoT Strategy and Operations. I'm going to have a few beta students go through the course at a greatly reduced rate to get some feedback before I open it up to everyone else. If this is something you want to find out more about, please contact me at bruce@iotinc.com. And remember, there's a hyphen between the IoT and the Inc. And with that, I give you more blockchain. With me today on the IoT Show is Zaki Manian. Zaki is the Executive Director of the Trusted IoT Alliance, the co-founder of SKUchain, and an advisor to numerous blockchain projects. Zaki is a software engineer and cryptography expert focused on the community and governance functions needed for blockchains to succeed. Zaki, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
So for blockchains to succeed, what's your view from a percentage point of view? How much of it is technology versus community and governance versus business?
I would say that the unknowns, the real experiments, can this even work at all questions are now more becoming community and governance questions and less technology and use case questions.
And what do you mean by that?
So I've been in blockchains for what is in blockchain terms a really long time. I got into the space sort of in 2013 during the first sort of big Bitcoin price run up. I started a company in 2014 in the space, SKUchain. And so as a result, I've been in this space for a long time. And in the beginning, the first question was, there were a lot of technology unknowns. Can we build these blockchain systems? Will they work? Will they be secure? Will they scale, etc.? Right. There were a lot of unknowns then. And then the other big question was, are they useful for anything? Is there a point to doing this? Are any of these applications that we're talking about, is there going to be market acceptance of any of this? And I would say that, what we are seeing this year, I think from the point of view of a lot of insiders in the space, a lot of those questions are answered.
Okay.
In the sense that we have enough promising, we know a subset of the technology works really well. We know it's secure. And we have enough promising approaches to overcoming the challenges in the technology that we feel like we can overcome most of the near-term technical challenges.
Now, when you say the challenges, are you referring to, I guess, computational effort that's required to, use the blockchain at scale?
Our biggest sort of the biggest question that has emerged in blockchain. So in the beginning, it was just the question of whether or not sort of decentralized peer-to-peer software, whether or not these protocols could be secure, whether or not we would have intractable attacks. How much effort was this really going to take to build systems like this? Recently, let's say for about the last year, the real question, as use cases have become more compelling, as more people start to use these systems, scalability has become a real challenge.
Right.
And probably the other two challenges, one was privacy, which is being able to control how much information you reveal to the world when you're using these systems. And the second question was scalability. Can all the people who want to use these systems at the same time?
Now, when you talk scalability, is that referring to the number of, let's call them nodes, or the number of participants within a blockchain, or is there other factors involved?
The biggest scalability question is really the question of how many transactions can the system process a second? Okay. So essentially, how many times can the database be updated over a period of time? We didn't go into what is a blockchain.
No, we'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there.
So that might be a good place to kind of dig into like what is a blockchain. But we have this sort of transactions per second metric,
right,
in a given blockchain system,
and you have to compete, with the existing, I guess, transactional payment gateways that can do thousands per second, right? And I guess
absolutely.
And I'm wondering, Zaki, more about what's causing that as opposed to that metric. What is behind that metric? Again, what are the factors that contribute to it potentially not doing enough transactions per second?
Yeah. So you come into the question as to, so these get into super technical topics, and I am an expert in these super technical topics. Yeah. But I don't want to get too far down into the weeds. But what I'll say is, what is unique about blockchains are we have had traditional databases and this is a kind of a good idea to good opportunity to sort of get into what a blockchain is. Mm-hmm. A blockchain, so the mental model and this explanation works on about 80% of people.
Okay.
The mental model is a Google spreadsheet. Everybody's used Google spreadsheet. It's a shared rows and columns of data. Everybody is editing the same one. So when you edit, everybody else sees your edits at the same time.
Right.
So that's Google spreadsheet. Those are the interesting properties. Now, in order for that to be possible, though, in the conventional system, Google is sitting in the middle and ordering everyone's interactions, saying, "Okay, you're authorized to make this change. You're authorized to edit this document. Zaki has edited this cell, and then Bruce edited it. So it's now Bruce's edit that is the edit of the document that everybody else sees." Mm-hmm. So the first breakthrough, the fundamental breakthrough of a blockchain is to be able to do that without the Google computer in the center and without having to be sure that all of the other computers that are interacting, that are sharing the single spreadsheet, the single ledger, mm-hmm. that they're all trustworthy and cooperative, that they're all going to follow the rules of the protocol. We needed to build a system that allows people to break the rules, but everybody to still see the same spreadsheet.
Okay.
So then what happens? So you got this shared spreadsheet. This is the shared ledger concept.
Yep.
Now imagine that, one column of the spreadsheet is account numbers, and the other column of the spreadsheet is the amount in each account.
Okay.
And so we're going to apply a rule. The rule is that the total amount of money in the system can never change. That the total of all of the accounts must always be the same. Mm-hmm. So anyone can make an edit, but when they edit the system, they need to be able to when they edit the system, it has to check and it has to maintain that total is always the same. That prevents you from creating money from nothing. So that's the next level that's built upon it. And then you have a third problem, which is how do you know who has the right to edit a given account? If you've got your account on this list, you don't want someone taking 500 out of yours and giving it to themselves. So instead of having account numbers, we have cryptographic keys. We have public key on the account next to the amount that's in it, and we have a private key that stays with the user. Mm-hmm. And any update that changes that account needs to be signed by the private key of the user. So you have Google Spreadsheet. This Google Spreadsheet doesn't have any Google computer in the middle. It maintains this invariant. It says always the total must equal the total amount of money in the system can never change. And then every account has a cryptographic key associated that authorizes changes to the amount that's in that account.
Okay.
Once you have that, you have a cryptocurrency.
Now, you're talking about a cryptocurrency. Now, you can obviously have a different rule than the total amount of dollars, or, you're using this metaphorically, aren't you?
Yeah. So you can express essentially arbitrary sets of rules in these systems. And this is where this whole idea of smart contracts comes in.
Right.
Because what smart contracts are the ability to write programs that sort of dictate the way in which updates to the system will then occur. So and so the number of different systems that can be designed like this is sort of boundlessly large. Mm-hmm. And a big part of the whole blockchain space has best been building out all of the different potential ways such a system can be designed.
Okay. So the design?
But where we came from, so I just want to kind of bring us all back to that scalability question.
Yes.
Everybody knows or software engineers have known for a long time how to build a Google spreadsheet effectively, or a shared ledger. If Google is sitting in the middle, connecting to everybody and intermediating every interaction that scales to thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of people interacting with the same system. But when you take Google out of the middle, when you take that centralized trusted party out, it creates a whole new set of computer science challenges. And those computer science challenges are why the first generations of these systems have been 3 to 10 transactions per second.
Okay.
And that's really where it's that one thing that we take out, which is having that Google in the middle. But it's taking out that Google in the middle that really gives us this new security property, which is no one is the administrator. There is no person who has unilateral authority to go in and change anything about the shared ledger. And the price we pay for that in order to sort of make that property possible is some degree of restriction in how fast we can process data.
Now, again, I want to just push a little bit more on this. The processing, it's 3 to 10, let's say the first iteration, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the evolution, but let's say it started at 3 to 10 transactions per second.
Yep.
Was it computational speed that was what was holding it back? What are the metrics that are holding back, and then you can then move into where we are today?
So for a bunch of computers on the internet to come to an agreement without any centralized party is called consensus.
Right.
That's the term that is used to describe this process. And the consensus process goes with the consensus process that you have to enable. So in order to have a consensus process that tolerates malicious parties as part of it, you need Byzantine fault tolerant consensus.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is happening is these computers are running various cryptographic protocols. And before Satoshi, there wasn't ever, before what Satoshi invented with Bitcoins, Satoshi invented something that was really unique, which is a cryptographic consensus protocol that anyone could join just by starting to solve puzzles, cryptographic puzzles on their computer. So anyone could join this consensus process, thousands of computers. Now, we've ended up in a kind of state where effectively, maybe about 8 to 10 parties on the Bitcoin blockchain are actually participating in this contest at a meaningful level. But when you rolled out the system, anyone could join.
Okay.
And they didn't, they could just join with their CPU on their hard drive. And that is an incredibly powerful thing because it really allows the system to recover from any kind of failure. So like, let's say the guy who's participating in the consensus and producing, ordering the system, let's say his computer gets hacked or his power goes out or his internet connection goes down. Someone immediately and very quickly takes over and continues the process. And so the cost of that, though, the ability of anybody to just step in and take over without any other sort of complicated recovery process has there's sort of an inherent cost of that the easier it is to recover from failure, the slower the system processes transactions.
Okay.
But as these systems advance, we're able to make these trade-offs in a more fine-grained manner, and that is why I'm hopeful that we're going to see massively higher, faster, more scalable systems start to be deployed in the next year or so.
And the increase in speed will be from algorithm changes?
Yeah, it will primarily be from improvements in the algorithms and different security trade-offs that we make as we understand how these systems, from all the learning that we've had over the last, 6-7 years of studying Bitcoin and all of its related systems.
So the new algorithms are going to be more efficient, therefore requiring less computational horsepower, and that will then increase the transactions per second?
So the computational horsepower is related to the security model, but what we're going to do is we're going to evolve and create new variations on the security model that'll be slightly different, but no less secure, and in sort of the global sense of the word secure, but different. And because we're changing these parameters, we can go faster.
Okay. So then it becomes more practical with the computing resources that we should apply to this particular problem.
Yep, absolutely. It becomes enormously more practical to imagine these systems running at the scale of the payment processors or a large-scale internet website.
So where are we, just to get some metrics, what's the speed of the payment processors? And you mentioned first generation was 3 to 10 transactions. Where are we now? And then where do we project it to be?
So there is probably, everything that is, the established systems are like Bitcoin is sort of 3 transactions per second. Ethereum is about 10. Those are the established systems that are out in the world. We've had enterprise systems, so systems that not anyone can join, but they do hundreds or thousands of transactions per second.
Oh, okay.
And we have, in testing with intention of deployment or early stages of deployment this year, we have seen the beginnings of the deployment of systems that themselves do hundreds or thousands of transactions but are open to the public. And what I'm expecting is, and I'm sort of feeling very positive about just from my involvement in the research in this space, is that we will see large scale deployment of these things that are in various stages of their early deployment and testing. widely deployed in the next a year or so, massively increasing the transaction throughput in the space.
So it sounds to me the hundreds of thousands. Now you're kind of contrasting, the public Bitcoin or the public ledgers with the private ledgers, and I may be getting the terminology wrong. But now
that's a reasonably good.
Okay.
Public versus consortium is perhaps the right.
And at 100,000 transactions per second,
not 100,000, hundreds to thousands.
Oh, so hundreds to thousands. Okay.
Yeah.
And how does that compare then? And I know I want to then compare. I want you to explain the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain in a moment. But because we're kind of in the currency kind of space, but how does that compare to what we're doing now with, let's say, again, with whatever mechanism I'm assuming it's going to be Visa or MasterCard. I don't know.
So usually the number that we typically throw around in the space is, so Visa's sort of peak global capacity is about, I think the number that I've seen repeatedly is 45,000 transactions per second.
Got it.
But that's actually multiple systems that aren't kept in sync. Like in general, the credit card issuers in Singapore don't need to be kept in sync with the credit card processing for New York City. And so typically any given one Visa system is sort of peaks at 4,000 to 5,000 transactions per second. And, that's like, Christmas Eve.
Okay. 4,000 to 5,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Just trying to give our listeners just a rough gauge of where we are right now with the efficiency of blockchain, because obviously everyone's listening and the question that's going through everyone's mind is this practical? Should I even be looking at this now, or should I just sort of shelf it for a little while? And what you're saying is, we're around the hundreds to thousands. The bogey, probably assuming the bogey was for cryptocurrency, but the bogey would be around 4,000 to 5,000. So what are we, a year or 2 years away to kind of at least be able to match the speed of, say, the Visa?
So I think for the biggest bottleneck in at least public blockchain, cryptocurrencies and non-cryptocurrency public blockchain use cases today is without a doubt scalability. And I don't necessarily think we need to match Visa scale in order for scalability to no longer be a bottleneck.
Okay.
But we need to come close. We need to be in that ballpark. And so when we get into the thousands of transactions per second in a system, at that point, scaling no longer becomes the biggest bottleneck, and attention will go to other things.
Right.
And then, as those other things start to take off, attention will return to scale.
Okay. And getting to that, you alluded then, while we're going to be using different cryptography algorithms, they are going to be as secure as the ones that kind of grew up with blockchain in the first place. True?
That is the hope.
That's the hope. Okay, so that's still an unknown variable at this point.
Yeah, I would say that there's a lot of really good work being done in this space, and in general, I'm confident that we will be able to produce things for the community. That we, the blockchain community, will be able to produce things for the public that are secure and scalable.
Okay. Well, please clarify for everyone, because we've kind of been going back and forth, but what's the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain?
So Bitcoin is the first blockchain. It is, the word blockchain doesn't even exist in either the original Bitcoin code base or in the original Bitcoin white paper. What Bitcoin is it was conceived as a system in which there was no central authority. So it was the first practical system without a central authority that could be deployed and given to strangers on the internet to interact with each other over, yet could still remain secure. So that was the breakthrough that was Bitcoin. What Bitcoin is a system where there is a single unit of value. There is a singular unit of value, and that singular unit of value is transferred back and forth between users, They have a small programming language that can define what the rules around that programming language could be, and people have come up with clever ways of using that programming language to implement things like micropayment systems on top of Bitcoin. But as an ongoing matter, Bitcoin is a very conservative design. It's all I want to do is I want to make a form of internet money that people can peer-to-peer send back and forth to each other to support their economic goals, that they can save, that hopefully speculators will purchase, and that speculation will drive demand for the system, and eventually that will drive use cases. So that was basically the vision of Bitcoin, and it was very much the first system.
And it's synonymous with cryptocurrency. Is that correct or false?
Yes.
Okay.
It is synonymous with this idea of units of value that exist in blockchains that have properties that are like money or a digital asset.
Okay.
What probably the most significant thing that has happened this year is, so if you look at the kind of the storyline, so like the storyline is Bitcoin is released as software in 2008. Almost nobody except a very small, tight-knit group of what are called cypherpunks were paying any attention to Bitcoin. And in about 2011, sort of a wider group of people started to pay more attention to it. In 2014 and 2015, large companies mostly started to look at this and start saying, this question of having a shared authoritative database that no one is in charge of seems like it might be applicable to lots of business problems that we face between us and our business partners. Yes. And so there was a collective move towards starting to do serious research and development at companies like IBM and consortiums like R3. And that was kind of the story of sort of 2013 to 2016.
Okay.
In 2016, a public blockchain that was not really oriented around the currency application, but really oriented around extensibility. Like, you can try to use this thing for anything you want, which is called Ethereum, launched. And the story of Ethereum has been the massive increase in valuation of Ethereum and its emergence as a potent fundraising platform that has sort of then completely transformed the blockchain sector in 2017.
Now then, relate that.
So when we say blockchain, we really mean all of these things. We mean using these distributed ledgers as a monetary and money system. We mean using them as a shared ledger and a shared source of truth for businesses that are interacting with each other, that rather than sending messages and email and API calls back and forth, we actually have which we have to reconcile with each other. We instead have this shared ledger. And it means these public, extensible, programmable platforms that could potentially be extended to a huge variety of different use cases. But so far, their most successful use case is as a fundraising platform.
So the blockchain, okay, so I understood it, and it seems like I misunderstood it, but I thought the blockchain was let's say a subsystem or technical component of Bitcoin. And what you're saying is, no, it's more of a superset, and it's not related to any specific technology. Am I understanding it?
Yeah, that's the right way to think about it. It's a word that encompasses a shared technology movement that is going on right now in the world, that is that is emerging and changing and having a large impact on both the financial and non-financial sector of the world. But it doesn't mean any one technology or a particular subsystem of Bitcoin. It's really just almost like a design pattern. It's more like the cloud than it is a subsystem of Bitcoin.
Yeah, okay. Well, that helps. All right, well, this is a good transition then into applying Bitcoin, or I should say blockchain, to IoT. So can you tell me, maybe you have experience in blockchain, obviously, and Bitcoin, but can you maybe tell us your experience in IoT, and then how did then, I mean, you mentioned in 2017, 2016, we're now applying it to different business problems.
Yeah.
And shared truth is a huge one for IoT, but maybe can you just talk about that transition and transition us into IoT and blockchain and why it's important?
So I think the IoT question is actually probably one of the, not this year, not next year, but maybe next year. But as we go down this the journey, the intersection of IoT and blockchain is going to be one of the sort of biggest open questions that could sort of either really enhance the potential of IoT and enhance the potential of blockchain, or if we don't get it right, really perhaps delay both systems from really trying to find their real value in the world. So let me kind of walk through my sort of story that led me to being executive director of this foundation, of the Alliance. And the Alliance is a not-for-profit. We are a consortium. We have big companies like Cisco, Bosch, Gemalto, US Bank involved, and we have many startup companies. SkuChain was one of them, which is a company I've co-founded, but I left to become executive director of the Trusted IoT Alliance. And what really was the sort of the formative notion of this is, so 2015 and 2016 were really the years of deep banking, deep exploration by the banking sector of all of the possibilities of blockchain. Cryptocurrencies, non-cryptocurrencies, shared ledgers, all of that stuff.
Because they're freaking out, right?
Well, freaking out is the wrong word. Right. I'd say intrigued is the right word.
Okay.
Really intrigued and smelling money. And so what happened in the blockchain, what happened in that time period is, so SkuChain was exploring lots of opportunities, and it has been exploring lots of opportunities for blockchain to integrate with trade finance systems. And so one of the things SkuChain did is we did the first international transaction where it was a real transaction with real money, 86 bales of cotton going from Houston to China, Commonwealth Bank on one side, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Wells Fargo on the other, all big brand names, real live transaction.
Yep. And
there was one piece of it, which was we had a GPS sensor that was already there in the shipping container, and we used that as as part of the smart contract that dictated the flow of funds between the parties. And basically the way a trade finance contract will typically work is the seller will have a contract that says, I will pay you once you prove the goods are on the ship.
Right.
So that's like traditional 400-year-old trade finance contract between parties. But we introduced this very 21st century piece, which is how are we going to prove it? One of the ways we're going to prove it is this GPS sensor tells us that the goods are on the ship. It was a great and incredibly intriguing, and the entire world found that piece of it really powerful. But then you kind of go back and you ask the question, okay, what does it take to do this for real? What if we wanted every shipping transaction in the world to use GPS sensors as part of the proof that the goods are on the ship? Well, what would it take to make that future happen? And it became very clear to me that there was no way, this was not a product that a startup company goes out and builds. That you don't go out and say, I'm SkuChain, I'm going to raise a bunch of money, I'm going to go out and build the end-to-end blockchain collateral stack for the shipping and for the entire global trade industry. there's a huge number of reasons why that is not a successful business strategy. But there's this incredible value out there. So, I started talking to other people in the blockchain IoT space, and we got about 40 companies together in a house in the Berkeley Hills. And we just started hashing this out and being like, do you guys all see this possibility? Do you see the incredible value that we could create? And do you also agree that nobody's going to be able to create this value by themselves? That this is going to be a collaborative process.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we started working together, we focused on this whole. We realized we needed an alliance, and really the Trusted IoT Alliance has become an alliance in the blockchain space like no other. There is no. We're unique because we're a not-for-profit. There's no startup company in the center, but we are a collaboration between many startup companies and many large enterprises. Our remit is not just to develop software, but actually really to develop specifications and ecosystem governance processes in order to really, so that somebody who's making the device and putting a cryptographic key in it knows that cryptographic key can talk to the various blockchain protocols that are out there, that the middleware that connects the GPS sensor all the way out to the internet is going to be able to carry that message that needs to go into, be communicated to a blockchain faithfully, and there will be compatibility there, that we're going to be able to identify the life cycle of sensors and devices from the time they are built in the factory to they get deployed in the field, so that when you want to describe that device that's sitting and, a sensor that's sitting on your collateral out there in the world, you are able to say, oh, I believe that sensor is trustworthy and believable because I can trace its origin all the way back to the factory with, Cisco or Intel or Gemalto, et cetera. Hmm. So bringing all of these pieces together has become the mission of the Trusted IoT Alliance. And really where IoT and blockchain connect to each other is that cryptocurrencies are wonderful things because they are things unto themselves. Like a Bitcoin has no reference to the rest of the world. It is nothing more than an entry on that shared blockchain ledger.
Right. There's no gold backing it, for example.
There's no gold. There's nothing else. And that is, and to build a system of smart contracts and peer-to-peer financial interaction, that is absolutely the right place to start. But the reality of the world is most financial transactions involve some interface point to the real world. Yeah. There is a bar of gold. There is a ship full of oil. There is a house
and there's a bunch of humans.
There's a bunch of humans, et cetera, that are part of these transactions. And the blockchain, to enable a future where the blockchain drives is a big part of everyone's financial and economic life. There has to be a connection between that real world and the blockchain. And that is what Trusted IoT is all going to be about.
So is the output then going to be what? Is it going to be a protocol that can be used, and we can get into this, but is it going to be a protocol that is incorporated within the IoT data stream, or is it something else?
So the output of this, I definitely framed the problem. And how to solve that problem is going to be a shared process of discovery. But what are things that we expect to come out of it? We expect device manufacturers to start changing the way that their devices are made so that they can securely store keys, securely execute programs, so that when we make expectations of those devices that only this device could generate that signature, cryptographic signature. Mm-hmm. And if this device tells me, it processed the data, it pulled GPS coordinates or temperature data or motion detector data or any, how many, or vibration data or any of these other things that we might care about, that we can believe it. So there's a device engineering side. Mm-hmm. And then there's really describing how all of these interlocking pieces actually fit together for any particular use case. So it could be as simple as a use case of just device history and device provisioning, which is, very widely applicable, or it could be very specific for anything from, how did that IoT sensor that tracks, my gold bar, my barrel of oil, et cetera, where did it come from? What is the data that we need to keep checking in order to say that a digital asset, for instance, that represents an ownership of that barrel of oil, is still valid and still alive, and that people should treat it as essentially an effective ownership in that barrel of oil.
Mm-hmm. Now, to me, though, when I think about this, I'm just trying to think of it more practically. If we're talking about, let's say, the barrel of oil, so we have the first problem that you're referring to, and this is going to be on the shoulders of the device manufacturers, is going to have somehow have a grounding for their identification, but there has to be you have to first make sure that the sensor is trustworthy, and then for this barrel of oil, you want to make sure that the data coming from the sensor is trustworthy. Now,
that it can that it can make it all the way to wherever where that shared system of record is living.
Right, and so that's kind of where I'm getting at. Now, to me, then if we squint our eyes, what we're talking about is data. And now, the data is a payload, and it's wrapped around, by a number of different protocols to help with the networking, the radios, and then eventually the application itself. There's an application protocol around in IoT. So now what I'm wondering is this wrapped around, where is this? I'm just thinking practically how, this would fit into an existing system, IoT system. Where is this data stored? Is it just part of the payload, or is it another protocol that's wrapped around the payload before you wrap around the application protocol? You know where I'm going with this?
Absolutely. And the answer to that question is the membership of the Trusted IoT Alliance is figuring out the answer to this question as we speak. Okay. And the way I could give you some examples. So probably early next week, I'm not sure when this podcast will go out, so it'll be a couple of days. Mm-hmm. It'll probably be online by the time this podcast goes out. One of the Trusted IoT Alliance members is going to be open sourcing called Oken Innovations, is going to be open sourcing a library by which IoT devices can use identities on the Ethereum blockchain and sign cryptographically their MQTT messages which is a sort of widely deployed IoT communications protocol, with those identities. And they actually developed this protocol as part of the collaboration with Toyota to enable a blockchain-enabled ride-sharing system. But it's very general to all kinds of IoT applications. But it's a great first stab. And one of the things that the attitude of the Trusted IoT Alliance is very much the only way we're going to learn it is by doing stuff and working together. So this, Oken and Toyota had a very specific problem they were trying to solve, which is, making actions on the Ethereum blockchain interact with a particular car. They built this protocol. I think they believe, and we believe, that there's a good chance that maybe that's generalizable to lots of different applications about how they've interfaced the blockchain cryptography with the MQTT IoT layer. But we're going to go out and we're going to put it out there in the world, and hopefully people will build on it and use it, and we'll learn whether or not this was the right way of going about it or the wrong way of going about it by real world experience.
Okay. Yeah. No. And that approach, we'll see. I guess if that works, but I think it holds water at a high level. So for everyone listening, MQTT is one of the, let's say, 5-6 most popular application protocols that are using IoT, and the application protocol wraps around the data payload to give it some sense, what it is and where it came from and how it's computed. And then here, this is adding to it a signature for identity. And so, I could see that working. But I think what you're saying is, that might work, but we're still trying to sort it out.
Yeah, and the best way to sort it out is to get, Cisco, for instance, makes an enormous amount of tooling around MQTT for hundreds of millions of IoT devices that are out there in the world. And who better to start telling us whether or not, let their MQTT engineers take a look at the protocol, see whether or not this was a crazy approach, or they're like, or, there's these messages, we're not going to recognize them in the giant middleware stack that's already in, thousands of deployments all over the world. Or tell us, yeah, this works. It's a plausible way of relating identity from the Ethereum blockchain to IoT messages, and maybe we can build the next things on top of that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, let's shift from technology to business now, and I have to admit, to everybody, and everyone knows that I'm relatively new at this, looking into this, but for me, what came up immediately as being a useful use case, and you kind of referred to it earlier, but that is the transactions that are involved around an ecosystem. And, just for everyone listening, the ecosystem is brings together the producers and the consumers of the IoT tech in order to monetize it. So right now, if you are dealing with a number of companies that are trying to deliver an outcome for a customer, it's going to be more of a legal contract, and I've been involved in this with some of my clients. It's going to be a legal contract that defines the payment scheme, let's say, among other things, also data ownership and a few other components. So to me, at a high level, being a newcomer to trying to understand how blockchain fits in IoT, that's real fertile ground, because we need to have efficient ecosystems to actually deliver on what I believe is IoT's killer app, and that is being able to deliver outcomes. Can you talk to that a little bit, or is that kind of a focus that the Trusted IoT Alliance is looking at, or is there other areas that are deemed maybe more important at this particular time?
So I think by saying like the point of IoT is that it delivers outcomes is kind of a different way of saying something that I really is definitely one of the formative insights of the Trusted IoT Alliance, which is you have multiple interacting business entities. You have devices that maybe not everyone is fully confident in, and people aren't fully confident in their security. And so what do people do with that? Well, they go back to analytics. They say, I'm gonna ingest, terabytes and terabytes and petabytes of data. We'll run it through lots of data science. We'll give it to the machine learning and data science people. They'll tell us what we should do. You get these examples where companies are primarily using their IoT devices as kind of as a set of eyes and ears over a vast physical deployments of buildings, shipping containers, ships, planes, etc.
Sure.
But they don't really necessarily let the IoT device really come in and change a business decision or in real time affect an outcome. And the blockchain is potentially a really interesting set of technologies that lets us change that. Because if we give cryptographic identity and security to devices, then we should be able to start believing what they tell us about the world. It becomes much harder for them to be subverted, to lie, et cetera. We give them secure operating systems, et cetera. So now you're creating value for security rather than just security as being a cost center. It becomes a value center. And then you have a bunch of organizations, and a bunch of organizations need to be able to collectively act on the information. So, one of the things that comes to my mind is like you have a shipment of vaccines. That shipment of vaccines is in a refrigerated shipping container. It's going from one port to one ship to port to another ship to another port. A sensor detects that shipping container has sort of exceeded its temperature threshold. So you don't want that shipping container to be delivered all the way to the hospital, in India or Nairobi, et cetera, then to open it up, check the sensor and be like, okay, we got to ship this thing back. Ideally, the minute the refrigerating unit failed and the temperature was out of spec, The shipping container should have just said, send me back home. But where does that logic lie, and who should trust that authority was efficiently given, was correctly sort of applied? And really, there's not a better environment for sort of expressing that kind of business logic than a blockchain. And so that's the future that we kind of are trying to imagine, where the blockchain really becomes a huge enabler for IoT to deliver sort of outcomes, and to an IoT device to meaningfully change a business outcome in real time based on the data that it has, and based on the fact that there's this entire system that has assigned a level of trust to that IoT device.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And, everyone listening now is probably thinking the same as me, and that is, great, sounds good, but then how's this going to help my business? And, we're getting back to the shared truth part of it, where you're talking more about let's say the supply chain of data, or getting the data, looking at the data, making sure that the data is integral, is real, and then making decisions based on that. And that plus the ecosystem concept that I brought up earlier, the efficiency is all, from my understanding, and I'm still learning here, but the efficiency seem to all come from this shared truth because of what you were talking about earlier, of eliminating the middlemen, middle women, whatever the case may be, but eliminating the middle persons, okay, and middle computers and middle companies in this process. So at a very high level, is that what you see from a business perspective now? The let's say the killer app for blockchain for IoT.
So one of the biggest things that have changed in sort of 2017 is the protocol engineering space in blockchain traditionally was sort of very underfunded. Most of the funding went to sort of proof of concepts of different use cases, building market infrastructure like cryptocurrencies and exchanges. Protocol engineering used to be has historically in the blockchain space been a very poorly funded thing. Maybe $10 or $20 million a year across big companies, startup companies, et cetera, because startup companies have many concerns beyond engineering, finding customers, et cetera. What has changed in this last year is that this ICO boom, this has radically changed the funding paradigm, and the way research and development dollars are being spent on protocol research. And so, what I suspect is that there is going to be an enormous surge, first of research and development, and then of new business opportunities coming off of that research and development around IoT devices connecting directly into various kinds of digital assets that live on various kinds of blockchains. And the first companies that really realize that opportunity and get to sort of and participate in communities like the Trusted IoT Alliance and set the rules for how different kinds of business processes now include both the trusted IoT devices and the block, have an opportunity to create like a sort of really powerful market position for themselves. And I think the Trusted IoT Alliance is just sort of like the natural place to do that collaboration.
But again, Zaki, to dig down a little bit deeper as to the why is because of efficiencies associated with it or something else?
It's because your IoT device can become potentially incredibly more valuable. That GPS sensor on the shipping container is, if all it's doing is helping you locate lost shipping containers that you're not sure where they ended up, it's not that valuable. If it now becomes part of the value flow for $80 million $80 million supply chain transfer, your GPS sensor now became a lot more valuable. If your IoT device is tracking someone's lost keys, it's valuable. If it's it's tracking a bar of gold, it's a lot more value.
Mm-hmm.
If your IoT device is, again, to go back to the keys example, if your IoT devices can let somebody share their lend their car to their friend, that's one thing. If it enables this sort of blockchain powered ride sharing service, and your car is out there making you lots of money when you're not driving it, that's an entirely new business possibility. So there's fundamentally new businesses and fundamentally higher value businesses that can be built around IoT where it connects to blockchain, and in really entirely new markets that are accessible to business people who are in the IoT space. And there's just like a huge, we're sort of at the moment where this stuff needs to get started. And I'm hoping to work with the members of the IoT Alliance to really enable that to happen.
Okay. Yeah, so it does sound like this value that you're talking about is being created by basically having an efficient way of having trusted data. And
there's a directness to it that is really important. What am I trusting? I'm not trusting the ship captain. I'm not trusting the shipping company. I trust in that sensor on that device because that was the sensor that was put on the device when it left the factory or whatever.
Yeah, and then you're describing the business value then because if there is trust there, then you don't have to verify the ship's captain. You don't have to verify, the systems and so forth. And it just makes that data a little bit more refined than, you don't have to necessarily process it a little bit more just to kind of use
it's just like, people become confident enough to make like an instantaneous business decision. Oh, I'll buy that bar of gold for you. I don't see it. I don't know anything about the vault where it's stored, but I've got this sensor and it says that it is correctly stored and it's signed off on that data. And okay, that's good enough for me. I'm willing to make that transaction with you. Everything that you can do to decrease that time where you have to de-risk a decision before you can make an economic transaction is just a huge value addition to the economy.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think, Zaki? I mean, how far out are we right now? I mean, for the business managers that are listening to us discuss this, a question on their mind, and it's on my mind, is, well, should I be looking at this now? Should I be parking this for a couple years? What's your advice then for everyone listening to, I guess, how to embrace blockchain at this particular point in time from a business perspective?
So from a business perspective, I would say what has happened in blockchain this year, I was expecting to be at least 3 years out. So my entire time horizon of what is going to happen in this space and how quickly it's going to happen has been enormously sort of compressed. So what I suspect is, and there's just, we're suddenly completely in this space, completely largely unlimited by access to capital. We have the access to capital, we have the access to engineering, and it's really just how fast can we go now. And so I suspect that the rules that will govern a lot of the future of these industries are being written now. And that sitting on the sidelines is probably the riskiest play right now.
So you're saying keep informed.
Keep informed, dive in. Without a doubt, what I tell to every single person in business is don't necessarily go out and say, I'm going to create my own blockchain initiative. Come to places like the Trusted IoT Alliance, because I'm sure you do business with companies either in the alliance or not in the alliance that are already doing things in blockchain. And there's a huge opportunity to get involved in your ecosystem's existing blockchain initiatives and really start writing, sort of defining how the future of your industry is going to work, where parts of this business logic are going to actually live on these blockchain systems.
Okay. No, and I agree with you. I mean, there's no sense, this is very similar to networking. There's no sense to reinvent the wheel here. This isn't part of, very few companies' core competencies. So contribute, be part of what's happening now as opposed to trying to invent it.
And have a voice, because the last thing you want to be is for everybody else in your ecosystem to have written once these systems get out there and are deployed in the world and people start using them, changing the rules is going to require Herculean effort. So you might as well have a stake and a say in how those rules apply and how they are going to affect your business. Because there is going to be a cost to, everybody else in your space says, okay, this is the way devices have to be authenticated on blockchains. This is the kind of keys they have to have. Mm-hmm. This is where the processes for deployment. This is how we're going to verify trust, etc. And you show up, and all of these decisions have been made, and large manufacturers are putting devices, and you'll just have to comply with them. And that'll just be the way the world works. And there's an opportunity right now to shape some of those decisions and make them integrate easily with your way your businesses want to run versus potentially facing a world where everybody else made those decisions and you just have to comply.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and it makes sense. Now, how long before these deployments actually start happening when it's actually too late?
I think it's quick. I think it's a year or two. There's so many interests that are aligned, and sort of one of the things that is really true about this, the economics of being involved in a blockchain is they're tough to get started, but once they get started, they are very self-reinforcing. And especially when you have some sort of cryptographic token, some unit of value that people can start trading back and forth. Because the minute that happens and there's a price and that price starts going up, everybody starts to pile in to be part of the thing. And so there's a huge opportunity here for these sorts of collaborations to get started. And, there's definitely going to be a lot of friction to get started. But part of the goal of the Trusted IoT Alliance is just to overall reduce that amount of friction in ways that generalize to lots of different applications. And then once people get started, I suspect these things will just snowball.
Yeah. And in general, I'm a big fan, or I believe, even from a business perspective, of this participation in these alliances or consortia. This one is obviously at the intersection of IoT, so for everyone listening, it makes a lot of sense. So how can people find out more about you and find out more about the Trusted IoT Alliance?
So if you are, I suspect many of your audiences are part of businesses of various sizes, and the Trusted IoT Alliance is designed to be a very sort of affordable commitment. You kind of our fees to enter the alliance. We have a completely flat structure. It's $2,500 for a foundation or a small company. It's $20,000 for the largest companies on earth. Right. It's designed to be, there's no multi-year commitments, etc. We have a very flat membership structure. So we really want to invite everybody who wants to start exploring the space to come join the alliance and start using us as a framework for discovering other people to collaborate with. And for sort of deeper collaborations with existing partners. You can follow, the best place to keep up with me is to follow me on Twitter. My tweets are mostly about things related to blockchains. And other than that, it's like programming languages, blockchains, cryptography. It's pretty technical, but, people seem to enjoy it.
No, yeah. So the world we live in. So, all right. So Twitter for you, and then to go to the Trusted IoT Alliance. I'll have all this in the show analysis.
Yeah, TrustedIoT.org. Trusted-IoT.org is our website. There is a membership form there, and membership is open to all comers. And I think that we're already showing a lot of value. We've been essentially open for business a little over a week right now. It took us almost 3 months to figure out we spent basically the entire summer figuring out governance with the lawyers at our large corporate members. I spent the summer basically talking to lawyers twice a week. But now that we have this governance framework in place, we're really ready to onboard members pretty much as fast as people are ready to join. And we have working groups forming, open source code being released, grant programs being developed, all kinds of things. It's just like the pace of activity is already incredibly rapid, and just trying to make it go faster.
Excellent. Well, I think $2,500 is, there's obviously the time associated with it as well, but the monetary investment's pretty low. When's the next?
The time investment is designed to be a barrier to no one.
Yeah.
But the time investment is more substantial because you can put as much time as you want, but hopefully it should just simplify things that you were doing anyways, like trying to work with a bunch of customers and partners around defining product and figuring out what your integration points are, et cetera. And rather than reinventing the wheel about how to build those sorts of collaborations, a lot of it can probably just be put into the Trusted IoT Alliance. All of our board is very committed to giving our members a lot of flexibility in how they use this sort of toolkit for collaboration that we've built.
Excellent. All right, Zaki, well, I appreciate it. I think you've laid out the blockchain for us in I like the 3-part analogy, starting with the Google Docs. And I like your perspective on using it for trust.
My experience with that analogy is 80% of people love it and 20% of people don't. It doesn't resonate for them. And I haven't been able to figure out a new simple analogy that works for that 20% of people yet.
Well, trust me, you've enlightened thousands and thousands of people with that 80%. So just with this podcast. So thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay, well, that was episode 93. A 3 and a 31. I like the episode, but I'm not a big fan of the number. To get an analysis of this episode, links to things that are mentioned in the show, plus the full transcript, go to the show analysis notes. They can all be found at iotinc.com/podcast. And note that if you sign up with the long form, that is providing a little bit more information about yourself and your goals in IoT, then you'll get access to Bruce's private reserve. And that has the transcripts for all the podcasts and all the videos. If you've been enjoying this podcast, subscribe to it. That way you get every episode delivered directly to your phone. And there are 3 ways you can support this podcast. You can share it on your blog, personal or company, if you think others will find it of value. You can share it on social by going to the show analysis notes and clicking on the social widget. That'll be either on the left-hand side if you're on a desk side or the bottom if you're on a phone. Or you can leave a rating or review on iTunes. Just go to www.iot-inc.com/iTunes/. Only takes 1 click, or maybe a little bit longer if you write your thoughts. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Until next time, may your path to IoT business be a chained one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc. Business Show.